The floorboards creaked under Karen Mitchell's designer loafers as she tiptoed through the front door, clutching a brass key that glinted in the afternoon light. She adjusted her HOA president badge on her blazer and raised her phone to snap photos of what she called unauthorized living room decor. The abstract painting above the fireplace would be her first piece of evidence. She was halfway through, documenting the offensive throw pillows when two uniformed officers stepped out from the hallway, their badges catching the same light as her stolen key. Their hands rested casually near their holstered weapons, and their faces showed a mixture of confusion and professional alertness. Karen froze mid-step, her mouth opening and closing like a fish, gasping for air. "My name is Marcus Chen, and I just moved into Oak Ridge Estates 3 months after my divorce finalized. The neighborhood seemed perfect with its manicured lawns and quiet streets until I met Karen Mitchell, the self-appointed queen of our HOA. My first citation arrived within 48 hours of moving in. The offense? My curtains were visible from the street. According to Karen, the HOA required all interior decor to maintain aesthetic appeal from every angle, including through windows. She delivered this news personally, standing on my doorstep with a clipboard and a smile that never reached her eyes. I thought she was joking until she handed me the official warning printed on HOA letterhead. The citations kept coming like clockwork. My mailbox was the wrong shade of black. My garden hose was coiled counterclockwise instead of clockwise. My recycling bin was placed at an 87-degree angle instead of the required 90. Each violation came with increasing fines and longer letters filled with references to subsections of the HOA handbook that I swear she was writing. As she went along, I started keeping my blinds closed at all times just to avoid her prying eyes. But even that earned me a citation for creating a hostile appearance that decreased property values. Karen's requests for interior inspections began subtly. She'd mentioned during board meetings how some neighbors had graciously allowed her to tour their homes to ensure compliance with the unwritten standards of excellence. When I politely declined her first request, she seemed genuinely shocked that anyone would refuse her. The requests became more frequent and aggressive. She'd appear at my door at odd hours, claiming she'd received anonymous complaints about strange smells or unusual noises that required immediate investigation. Each time, I firmly but politely refused entry, citing my right to privacy. That's when things escalated beyond simple harassment. I started noticing small signs that someone had been on my property while I was at work. A flower pot moved slightly to the left, footprints in my freshly mulched garden beds that didn't match my shoes. The final straw came when I found muddy footprints inside my foyer after returning from a weekend business trip. I immediately filed a police report, explaining the months of harassment and the suspected break-in. Detective Janet Rodriguez took my concern seriously, especially when I showed her the stack of citations and the increasingly threatening tone of Karen's correspondence. Detective Rodriguez suggested setting up a sting operation. She explained that without concrete evidence, it would be difficult to prove Karen was behind the intrusions. We installed hidden cameras and developed a plan. I would maintain my routine, making sure to leave the house at predictable times. The detective assigned 2 officers to wait inside my home during the hours I was typically gone. All we needed was for Karen to take the bait. What we didn't know was that Karen had already obtained a spare key from the HOA office, files left there by the previous owners. Contractor years ago. The trap was set for a Thursday evening, when I always walked my golden retriever, Bailey, at exactly 6:30. Like clockwork, I leashed up Bailey and made a show of leaving through the front door, making sure any watching eyes could see me heading down the street. Officers Maria Gonzalez and James Thompson were already positioned inside, having entered through my back door an hour earlier. They waited in my home office, monitoring the hidden cameras on a laptop. At 6:47, they watched Karen Mitchell approach my front door, glancing around nervously before producing a key from her purse. Karen entered my home with the confidence of someone who'd done this before. She moved directly to the living room, her phone already out and ready to document violations. She photographed my bookshelf, muttering about the inappropriate titles visible from the window. She captured images of my coffee table, which apparently violated the HOA's unwritten furniture placement guidelines. She was so focused on building her case that she didn't notice the officers until Officer Gonzalez cleared her throat and asked, in a calm, professional voice, what Karen was doing in my residence. The color drained from Karen's face as she spun around to face the two officers. Her phone clattered to the hardwood floor, the screen cracking on impact. She stammered that she was conducting an official HOA inspection, waving her badge as if it were a federal warrant. Officer Thompson asked if she had permission from the homeowner to enter, and Karen's response was a masterclass in entitlement. She claimed that, as HOA president, she had implicit authority to ensure all homes met community standards. She even suggested that the officers should be thanking her for maintaining property values that paid their salaries through taxes. Karen's hands shook as she rummaged through her purse, finally pulling out a laminated copy of the HOA bylaws. Her manicured nails clicked against the plastic sheets as she flipped through them frantically, searching for any clause that could justify her presence inside the house. When she began reading aloud, her voice trembling, about the association's commitment to maintaining standards, Officer Gonzalez cut her off mid-sentence. Calmly but firmly, he explained that HOA regulations were civil matters, not criminal ones, and that nothing in those bylaws could override state law. Breaking into a private home, he told her, was still a crime. The situation quickly worsened when Karen tried to storm out. Declaring that she was done with this harassment, she spun toward the door only to find Officer Thompson blocking her way. Flushed and trembling, she demanded to know whether she was being detained. When both officers confirmed she was, her carefully composed facade finally shattered. With shaking fingers, she pulled out her phone and dialed her husband, loudly proclaiming that she was a victim of police harassment and false imprisonment. His voice, initially full of outrage and support, fell silent once the officers explained the real situation. The silence that followed was deafening. Officer Gonzalez informed her she was being detained for unlawful entry and criminal trespassing. As the handcuffs came out, Karen's tone shifted from indignant to desperate. She babbled about misunderstandings, about having a key, about the HOA's supposed right to inspect properties. Her voice rose to a piercing pitch as she demanded to speak to a supervisor, threatened lawsuits, and bragged that her brother-in-law, a lawyer, would sue the entire department. None of her protests stopped the crisp click of metal closing around her wrists. The walk to the patrol car became instant neighborhood legend. Karen alternated between shouting legal threats and invoking her HOA authority as neighbors began to gather. Margaret Ellis from 2 doors down actually clapped, while Robert Chong recorded the entire spectacle on his phone. Karen tried to hide her face, but her platinum blonde bob and monogrammed blazer made anonymity impossible. She hissed about violations of privacy, seemingly unaware of the irony. At the police station, the entitlement continued. Karen refused to be fingerprinted, claiming the ink would ruin her manicure, and demanded a private holding cell because of her status in the community. The booking officer remained unimpressed and processed her like any other suspect. When finally granted her phone call, Karen didn't contact her lawyer brother-in-law. She tried to reach the mayor's office to complain about her mistreatment. The duty sergeant later told me she had never seen anyone so oblivious to the seriousness of their situation. News of Karen Mitchell's arrest spread through Oak Ridge, estates faster than any HOA newsletter ever had. By morning, every resident knew their president had been caught breaking into my home. The emergency board meeting that weekend was packed wall to wall. Former victims of Karen's petty tyranny stepped forward with their own stories of harassment and suspicious intrusions. The vote to remove her from the board was unanimous. Even her allies abandoned her. The board also enacted an immediate policy change requiring all spare keys to be returned or destroyed. When the criminal case began, even darker revelations surfaced. Prosecutors revealed that Karen had entered at least 3 other homes using spare keys from HOA files. She'd been compiling dossiers on residents she deemed problematic, complete with interior photographs and obsessive notes about both real and imagined rule violations. Her attorney eventually negotiated a plea deal to avoid trial, but the damage was irreversible. Karen Mitchell received 2 years probation, 300 hours of community service, and $10,000 in fines. Standing before the judge, her face registered pure disbelief that her self-declared HOA authority hadn't shielded her from real-world laws. The once untouchable ruler of Oak Ridge Estates had become a cautionary tale about the limits of power. The evidence introduced in court painted an even more disturbing picture. Investigators found photos on Karen's phone showing interiors of dozens of homes, including bedrooms and private spaces. On her computer, she'd created a filing system categorizing residents by their likelihood to challenge her authority. My own file was marked with a red flag and contained notes about my divorce, my work hours, and even speculation about my finances based on my furniture. Detective Rodriguez testified that this level of surveillance crossed well into criminal stalking. Karen sealed her own fate when she insisted on taking the stand against her lawyer's advice. For nearly an hour, she lectured the courtroom about standards, property values, and how residents like me were destroying the neighborhood's character. When the prosecutor asked if she truly believed she had the right to enter any home in the HOA, she said yes, without hesitation. The judge's expression hardened as Karen compared her HOA badge to a police search warrant. And with that, the woman who once ruled the neighborhood with an iron fist was finally brought down by her own delusions of authority.